Hi, everyone, and thank you for watching this presentation about the sensory room and the process and procedures that we'll follow for Limestone County Schools. So just a quick overview. The purpose of a sensory room in a school setting is to provide a place to promote sensory organization, self-regulation, and calming with our students. It can serve as an integral component to a student's overall sensory diet and is part of a sensory-rich environment. Students with multiple disabilities often have sensory impairments. By controlling sensory input in a sensory room, it is possible to eliminate distractions and assist these students to attend to specific objects that may help them to make sense of their external environment. A sensory room can also provide these additional benefits. We can modulate the environment so that you can reduce the opportunity for overstimulation. We can create a safe space with tools for the students to use to learn to self-regulate and manage their anger, overstimulation, and stress. We can create a controlled space to assess the type of environment a student is most comfortable in and sensory activities that they're most responsive to. We create a comfortable space for students to relax in to help them interact with others. And we can provide a safe place to help prevent and reduce meltdowns and learn to manage feelings leading to meltdowns. When used appropriately, a sensory room should provide a sensory managed environment. It should provide an environment that stimulates all the senses and heightens awareness and promotes relaxation. It should be an interesting atmosphere that allows children to explore their environment. It should be an unrestrained atmosphere where they feel comfortable and able to enjoy themselves. A sensory room should never be used as a timeout room for the purpose of behavior management. Nor should a scheduled sensory room break be withheld due to a student's negative behavior. And neither should a trip to the sensory room be used as a reward. When you're going to a scheduled sensory room break, here's the protocol to follow. All right, so ideally, the students will have a scheduled sensory room time built into their schedule. This should be a time that, based on data and behavior tracking, you have determined the student would benefit most. This might be upon transition to school or after PE, after lunch, or sometimes before morning work. The first few weeks of a school year, and again after extended breaks, you should track when the student seems to be in most need of a scheduled sensory room break. So let's follow the protocol now, shall we? A student needs to be escorted to the sensory room at their scheduled time. During their time in the sensory room, they should be supervised at all times. Before they enter the sensory room, they do need to demonstrate a certain level of self-control, okay? If a student is completely out of control, there is potential for property damage and injury to them or you. Most students are motivated to go into the sensory room and will be able to calm enough to go in, but they might need a little assistance from you in self-calming, such as sitting outside of the sensory room, taking deep breaths, squeezing their hands together. And when they have achieved a level of calm, they can enter the room. Before entry to the sensory room, they should remove their shoes. If they need help with this, give them assistance. Staff members should turn on the strip lighting to the student's preferred level of brightness. Turn off the overhead light unless the student tells you or indicates that they would like the overhead light on, because sometimes that is upsetting to some students. And as a staff member, then you set the timer to 12 minutes. During the first 10 minutes of the protocol, it's considered a student-directed free experience. Generally, students are going to gravitate to the equipment that provides the input that they seem to be needing at that time. For example, they might need to roll on the bolster, sit in the swing, spin on the swivel board, bounce on the trampoline, or receive pressure in the crash pad. Your job is to help them to navigate these experiences safely and be an active part of their experience Okay? This might include giving them a push for slow swinging in the swing, giving them some squeeze in the crash pad. Your job is also to ensure that the student is not engaging in any out of control, wild, or dangerous activities. You should keep your voice and mannerisms quiet and calm to help promote calming in the student. During the last 2 minutes of the protocol, this should be a time for quiet calming so they can get prepared to head back to their day. They might lay on the crash pad quietly or sit on the beanbag cushion quietly, zoning out and staring off into the bubble tube. The bubble tube can be a very calming sensory experience. At the end of the 12-minute protocol, instruct the students, put on their shoes, providing assistance as needed, and it's time to go back to class. There may be times that a student needs an unscheduled sensory room break. Okay? Sometimes they might be having an especially difficult day, and they could receive benefit from the sensory room. It would not be therapeutic to deny them this experience or have them wait for their scheduled sensory room time. You might notice that they're ramping up and need to get their behavior in check before they ramp up to a point of being out of control. And sometimes they may request a sensory room break, okay? So during these times, the protocols above apply, but they don't necessarily need the full 12-minute time. They might just need a few minutes to bounce or sit with the bubble tube. You as a staff member should provide the same level of supervision as the protocol that we talked about earlier and help them to facilitate the sensory experience that they need. Please note, it's very important that students do not see the sensory room as an opportunity to escape from a task or an activity. To help minimize this, provide opportunities for the student to engage in a sensory break in the classroom first. This might include providing fidgets, headphones with or without music, quiet time with the beanbag chair or under a weighted blanket, just to name a few examples. If the student still needs the benefit of a sensory room break, give them a first-then sequence, with the first being a very simple and achievable task, and the then being sensory room. For example, first, write your name. Then we'll go to the sensory room. Use your best judgment of what that first activity needs to be. Some students can only achieve first, clap your hands, boom, and then sensory room, okay? So use your best judgment on that, okay? It can get tricky to determine if the student is purposefully acting up just in order to obtain passage to the sensory room. And this is where your diligent ABC data tracking can help. The swing provides a vestibular input, which can be calming when the swinging is slow. Provide gentle back and forth or side-to-side assistance as needed. Provide close supervision for safety. The spin disc is another vestibular activity. Rotary movement can be very alerting. A child can use this to spin themselves by using the wall as an assistance. They should not ever stand on the disc. When finished, the disc should be stood upright against the wall. Make sure that you anticipate safety hazards when students are engaged with equipment. The bolster and the trampoline provide some vestibular input, but also deep pressure, which can be very organizing to the child. When the child gravitates towards the crash pad, they could be looking for deep pressure input, which can be very calming. You can provide additional pressure by squeezing them in the crash pad, ensuring that their head is clear at all times. The lighted bubble tubes offer a calming sense of stimulation. Students should be directed to quietly observe the bubble tubes at the end of their session before returning to class. Again, care should be taken to anticipate and prevent any safety hazards. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about safety. A couple rules. There should be no more than 2 students in the sensory room at a time. And some rooms are a little smaller than others, so use your judgment, but they should be restricted to only 1 student at a time if the room is excessively small. At least 1 staff member needs to be in constant supervision with the student or students. Students and staff members should remove their shoes before or upon entry to the sensory room. This helps to keep the mats in good shape, but also provides the added benefit of the tactile sensation to the feet. At no time should the sensory room doors be locked when the students are in it. The room should be wheelchair accessible and large enough to not be claustrophobic. Sessions should be recorded in a logbook and should not last longer than the defined 12-minute period. This log will be a paper form on a clipboard that will be attached either to the wall or near the visual timer or near the door to the sensory room. A few things to pay attention to, okay? When students are engaged in the spin disc or the trampoline or the swing, as a staff member, you need to pay close attention to their physical response. Both the spin disc and the swing provide vestibular sensory input, and to a lesser extent, the trampoline does as well. And some children can quickly become overwhelmed with vestibular input. If the child is demonstrating any of the following, please discontinue the equipment and provide some deep pressure. If you see a change in skin tone, they get flushed or pale. Changes in their breathing rate, look for rapid breathing. Or any other behaviors that are consistent with distress. They might show facial signs of discomfort. They might cover their ears. If you note these signs and note that the student is having an adverse reaction to the vestibular input, stop the activity and direct the child to equipment that provides deep pressure. Or direct them to the crash pad and give them some deep squeezes. With the student laying on the mat while the staff member rolls a ball over their trunk, or deep squeezes up and down their legs, arms, and rib cage. This deep pressure can calm an overstimulated system. In regards to maintenance, okay, again, children need to be supervised when in the room at all times. We need to regularly check the electrical equipment. For example, the lamps, the rope lights, the fiber optic lights, the media system, they need to be regularly checked. Equipment needs to be kept clean. Clean it immediately if the child soils the equipment. Clean all items in the room daily. For anything that is fabric, for example, the swing or the crash pad cover, if they get soiled with any bodily fluids, that equipment needs to be removed from the room and cleaned. Okay? We also want to remove any damaged or broken equipment so that we can repair it or replace it. Okay? Keep doorways and walkways free of any wires. Okay? Here is the QR code that you can scan for reporting. It's going to lead you to a form that you can report any equipment concerns or issues. Thanks for watching.